Hello, it's Real TVW, the man in the red jacket. I'm not wearing my red jacket right now because it's hot. This is...
Your wife.
But we want them to think we're not married to make it more interesting. The title of this video is Why the American Two-Party System is Best. Political thought, there's basically two types of politics. There's liberal and conservative, right? Liberal is for big government and more control, and conservative is more for small government and less control.
Which part is Trump?
Okay, so Trump used to be a liberal Democrat, and he supported the Clintons. But then, after he failed to run for president back in 2012, because he actually tried to run for president before, and he didn't do very well, he rebranded himself as a conservative and became a Republican, and that's how he won the White House. And actually, this video will talk about how Trump was able to win.
They can join two parties?
No.
No?
That doesn't make sense.
If he join one party, then another party will kick him out?
Yes.
So now, the president is Republican.
The president's Republican, and the judicial has got more Republicans in it, and the legislature. All the branches of government are having more Republicans because when one party wins, they usually win more. There's two parties, but there should always be one mission, right? The goal of the government is to serve the people, to provide stability to the system, to enact change in a measured way, to stop fringe players from becoming dominant. So even within the party of liberals, the Democrats, there's going to be people who are extremely democratic, moderately democratic, and centrist democratic. And then over here on the conservative side, there's going to be ultra-conservatives, semi-conservatives, and moderate conservatives. Two parties, one mission. We have to stop fringe players. The guy who's over here and the guy who's over here, these are the fringe people, right? They're very far away from where most people are. Most people trend towards the middle, right? They trend towards making the government work. Does that make sense? You would think most voters are here, right? Somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
So if people on the outside get too much power, they're going to cause trouble. Like that's what Trump did. Trump was way over here. And he caused a breakaway. My point is there's two parties, they have one mission. This should be the goal of the government, and it's not working right now. Now let's look at the goal of a candidate. A candidate is somebody who wants to get a job in the government. They want to be the mayor, governor, senator, president. So if you understand the two-party system and the goals, your job as a candidate is to do the following. You want to pull your party together. Because again, there's a spectrum of liberal to conservative, and there's people on different points. You want to make them all come towards your center, towards your idea. That way you can control your party, get more votes, get more government positions, and make your version of the government be a reality. You want to make fringe players more moderate within the party. You want to take people who are on the extremes and say, no, listen, you need to be more like us. We need to pull it together, right? And then you want to reach across the aisle to centrists of the opposing party. In government, when we say reach across the aisle, what that means is I'm a liberal, okay, I'm sitting on this side. See, I'm wearing blue, and you're a Republican, you're sitting on that side. You see, we're separate. I'm going to reach across the aisle means I'm going to go to you and say, hey, listen, I'm running for government, I have good ideas. You know, even though you're Republican, you actually have same ideas as I do. You see how we overlap? You should help me become, you should help me join the government so we can work together to make a better country. And last but not least, the candidate wants to give all party affiliates a vote. Party affiliate means anybody who is part of the party, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Because what happens if you ignore people, right? Look at our line. We have liberals over here and we have conservatives here. What if the people over here, right, the liberals, the super liberals, what if no one listens to them? What if all the candidates ignore them? What are they going to do? They're going to try to break away and start a third party.
When your American ancestors built the government, they didn't decide they want to be liberal or conservative. They don't have an idea what kind of a government they want to have.
No, we knew what kind of government we want to have. But the kind of government you want, which is a good government, And how to make that happen is two different things.
Mm.
So how to make it happen is how we came up with two parties.
Okay, George Washington made the government.
No. The founding fathers made the governments. A lot of men.
Okay, there's a group of men made the government, include George Washington.
Right.
And then when they make the government, they want every party have a equal opportunity to be the dominant party.
They didn't want any parties.
Mm.
They didn't think about parties. They were fighting a war against the biggest country on earth, the most powerful country.
Mm.
They wanted freedom, they wanted independence, they wanted health, pursuit of happiness. That was the idea. Now, George Washington had no party. Two parties came naturally after Washington.
So that means there's no rule have to be one of the party, but just people like to vote for those two parties. Everybody voluntarily they support those two parties.
There's a few different states that have a third party. They maybe have 10% of the vote, but 10% of the vote is not going to run the whole country.
Okay.
Like, have you heard of Bernie Sanders? He's
Yes.
trying to run. He is actually was a third party,
Mm.
but he never was able to gain enough traction to run for president, so he eventually joined the Democrats. Here's where we have some issues with the current two-party system, and this is issues across the whole world, and that is income inequality. You see, I believe that our two-party system is not working well because both parties are for the wealthy. It's not even important if you're liberal or conservative. It's important if you're rich or not rich. And so I feel like everybody in the government, whether they're liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, all they really care about is being rich and keeping themselves rich and passing laws so they can stay rich. And then voter engagement. This is the number one issue. Voter engagement. The voters are uninformed and uninterested. Do you know who to vote for? Do you know all their policies? Do you know what they stand for? Do you know all the laws and what they mean? Nobody knows because it's a lot of work to learn and study all these things. So we, as Americans, if we want to change things, we have to learn the policies and we have to vote. And so because of those two issues, right, the rich are helping the rich and people don't know what they're voting for, fringe players like Trump have taken over the system. If we look at history, that's not always been the case, right? If you look at all the way back ancient Greece, remember Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, those guys? Like Plato said, the perfect government is one party. One king who is a genius, who loves everybody and makes the world a perfect place, right? He had this idea, one man is so pure that he will make everything fair and equal. So there is one party system, right? Look at China. China has one party.
One party.
America has two party. And then other countries have 3, 4, 5, 6. But let's look at America, specifically right here in America. Historical proof that the two-party system works, makes sense, and will continue to work, okay? Back in the 1890s, so it's over 100 years ago, there was a party called the People's Party. They were also called the Populist Party or the Populists. So the Populists, they were worried about farming. It was mostly farmers. Okay, the country was like this. The railroads had a lot of control, the corporations. If you wanted to ship your farm goods to a city, you had to pay this railroad fee and this fee and that, and they said it's too much trouble. We can't make a living on farming. We can't vote for our own senators. You know, the Senate was being randomly picked by other people in the government. They said, hey, that person's supposed to represent me, and I'm not voting for him. Okay, so the Populist Party had all these great ideas. And how do I know they're great ideas? Because they all came true. But is there a Populist Party today? They don't even exist. They're none. You know why? Because a Democrat, William Jennings Bryan, stole their ideas. Because if you go back to our line, right, of liberals and conservatives, William Jennings Bryan he's a liberal here, sort of in the center. The populists were on the edge, so he gave them a voice. Not only did he give them a voice, but he took their ideas. He said, oh, control the railroads, that's a great idea. I'm going to make that a Democratic issue. So once the people saw that the Democrats were covering the issues they cared about, the People's Party disappeared because no one's going to vote for them. And they fade away to history. Collective bargaining. That means unions. Have you heard of unions?
Union. represent laborers.
Right. They didn't have that. The populists said, hey, we need unions. And are there unions today? Yes. In fact, unions had a rich history of America. And again, the union idea wasn't part of the Democrats or Republicans, it was on the fringe. But the Democrats took that idea and brought them to their party, and then we had unions. The regulation of railroads, right? Before the railroads were owned by too many companies, it was too hard to move all your things. The government took more control of the railroads, so we could have our food get to different markets easier. More monetary policy, right? Before the government had less control of the money, they took over more control of the money. They also wanted warehouses. The most important one of the populist ideas was direct election of senators. Remember, every state has 2 senators that represent the state. They're the highest people in the state in the government, right? And so before, they were elected by other people in government. But the populists said, no, we should be able to vote for our own senators. And the Democrats said, yeah, that makes sense. They brought that into the Democratic side. And today, we vote for our own senators. It's one of our amendments in our Constitution. That's how important that was. It became an amendment. Bimetallism, income tax, shorter work week, curb influence of corporate and financial interests, and empower small farmers and laborers. Recently in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel, her party won, but her party was one of like 5 or 6 parties. And the other parties didn't agree, so they were not able to form a strong government. Because there's too many parties, they don't get enough power base. Because remember, when you think about the power base, you need 51% of the people to vote for your policy to make a law. So your power base needs to be 51% or bigger. When you have too many parties, imagine if you had 10 parties and they all had 10%. That means you need to get at least 6 parties to agree with you for the government to run. If 5 parties disagree, you can't run the government because you don't have over 50% of the votes. So governments that have more than 2 parties always have to make a coalition. A coalition means like a team up. So they have to find different groups that are similar to them and say, can we run the government together? And it creates a lot of problems. And this, you hear in the news all the time, coalition government failed in Israel recently. Israel has many parties and they can't get a dominant party. So even though they voted for their prime minister, they voted for the leader, his party doesn't have enough power and he couldn't convince other parties to join with him. And their government's not running efficiently. Like I said, if you want to go in the comments and talk about your country and the parties, that would be great. We would love to learn about that.